Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next presentation within the asset management track. Just a few housekeeping items that I'm sure you've been hearing throughout the day and yesterday. If you're having any technical issues, just open up your Q&A and our meeting host will be able to assist you. And you can find this feature at the bottom of your presentation window within FeedLoop. And if you want a larger presentation on your screen, then you can just click on the top corner of the window. We will be conducting a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you have any additional questions or comments for the speaker, feel free to chat with them afterwards in the networking tab of FeedLoop. So now I would like to welcome Marcia O'Connor, founder of AM/FM Consulting Group, which we'll probably talk about a little. And her presentation is how facility managers are coping during COVID-19 and preparing for the new normal. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Marcia, for a nice warm welcome. Welcome everyone to our presentation today on how FMs are coping during COVID-19 and preparing for the new normal. As many of us in the room today are aware, we are dealing with COVID-19 on a day-to-day basis, and in particular over the last 18 months. It is definitely unprecedented times, and it's really important for all of us to prioritize our needs from a business perspective and a family perspective. Who am I? As Martha said, my name is Marcia O'Connor, and I'm the president and founder of AM/FM Consulting Group, Inc. AM/FM stands for Asset Management and Facility Management. I'm a specialist, an industry leader in assets and facility management. I'm an educator with the University of Toronto in facility management for the last 20 years. I'm also a management consultant, responsible or have a wheelhouse of knowledge from day-to-day management to strategic alliances with the board of directors or the C-suite or the corporate suite. And I also do career planning with past students, friends, clients, colleagues, family members, and helping them meet their dream job. I've written a number of articles, i.e. related to COVID-19 and any topics that are kind of thought-provoking in the industry. And I've also been asked to present at this year's 2021 Building Show, Property Management Show. And I have an opportunity to present evidence-based asset management for facility managers. So if you haven't had a chance to look at the agenda for the upcoming conference in November, December, I encourage you to take a peek. Thank you. All right, so where I'd like to start our journey today is I want to give you an overview of the topics I propose to cover with you in this seminar. I want to talk about some of the experiences from COVID as it relates to the facility management role and responsibility. I want to talk about some of the there's so many priorities, as you can imagine, and you've probably been facing them as well over the last 18 months. But I really want to focus on some key priorities that are impacting on all of us. And then we just got to keep in mind as we continue to move forward into this new normal or to the next normal of business and life. Getting it back on track is one of the biggest challenges I think we're all facing today because of our habits and our practices that we've been doing on a day-to-day basis over the last 18 months. But we are looking at, from a business perspective, of resuming our services. And what does that look like? So I'll cover that with you as well. And then for sure, let's kind of look at from a positive perspective of moving forward and keeping it all together and building some new habits as a result of the last 18 months. So I like putting this one up here. What it really does is kind of makes us stop and think. 18 months ago, there was a declaration with regards to the pandemic, and that happened in mid-March of 2020, as everyone will recall. And as you recall, there were daily directives, daily messages from our senior politicians and the medical profession and WHO as well with regards to COVID. And it was mesmerizing, I bet, for all of us, including myself, with regard to the information that was coming out on a continuous basis. So as I said, the declaration happened in March 2020, and immediately what happened was there was an establishment of priorities and protocols, and particularly identifying essential services. And FM was actually identified as an essential services. And I'll go into a little bit detail with regards to what was that role and responsibility for facility managers. So as you know, again, as of March 2020, there were strict protocols put in place. And that was not only in Ontario or Canada and North America, we were looking at worldwide priorities and protocols. So let's talk about some of the impacts of COVID-19. I think this is a refresher, but I also want to emphasize with regards to some of these impacts and how they impact on the facility management professional. Safety first, all right? Facility manager's role and responsibility is the health and safety, the well-being of the customers and of the physical plant, which is the building. During the impacts of COVID, we're talking about the risk assessment and understanding with regards to how do we mitigate that risk of COVID. Particularly in the outset, it was mesmerizing for all of us to figure out what protocols and what processes and priorities do I need to put in place. As you recall, back in March, one of the number one priority was, guess what? We're working from home. And I think there was a panic with many companies and organizations, what does that look like? And I know the facility manager in many, many organizations in collaboration with the IT department was trying to figure out what kind of laptops we have, what kind of furnishings do we have, what can we give to our employees so they can continue working from home. What we were advised of related to an impact of COVID is the readiness of an emergency. Not only were we dealing with COVID at the beginning of COVID at the outset, but we had to be ready for any other type of emergency that may arise. And it was tough. If you could imagine yourself, and it might have happened in your own organizations, but here we are at the beginning of COVID, not understanding what COVID-19 is or what it looks like in implications, and starting to put in protocols in our businesses and realizing that another emergency could come up and thinking, how can I deal with another emergency if COVID-19 is immersing myself and my team and my organization? There was an immediate need for leadership to step up to the plate and provide some direction and support to staff and customers. And then biggest issue with regards to the impacts of COVID is this tolerance. We were thinking that, and you're probably thinking, and I was thinking this back in March, April, May, June of 2020, that, this is past and then we can go back to our new normal. In fact, there were measures taken back in last August about going back to the workplace. And I know many of my colleagues and associates were looking at what is the workplace going to look like in September 2020? Well, that didn't happen. That didn't happen. And what we looked at were one of the big issues that cropped in here was dealing with mental health and well-being and dealing with our staff, and particularly with regards to working from home and trying to adjust to this kind of new normal, new habits that we're forming because of working from home and because of COVID as well. Key strategic measures were important to kind of consider at the beginning of COVID. Again, number one is dealing with health and safety. The other one is dealing with staffing work arrangements, either being at home. And even at the beginning of the pandemic, if you're aware, that not many staff were going into the workplace unless they were deemed as essential services. Facilities were shut down at the beginning of the COVID, and some were not. And some continued as status quo of business as usual. Customer service, there was a reaction with regards to how do we deal with our customers. Many organizations, particularly the retail sector, were looking at curbside pickup or more online services that they've never done before. Contractor supplier ability. At the beginning of COVID, oh my gosh, there was I'm going to call it a limited supply of contractor supplies that were in the marketplace. And I'll give you an example. I know of a long-term care facility down in the downtown core. Beginning of COVID, his elevator broke down. Okay, he went to his supplier and contractor, and his supplier would not come on site because of COVID. He had a major challenge with regards to trying to help his residents up a 6th floor building, if you can imagine. And there was no service provider that was willing to come through that front door. Securing PPE sanitation supplies. Think about this, March 2020, everyone was asked to look at their supplies. Well, guess what? Many companies and businesses didn't have a supply of PPE and sanitation supplies. And guess what? In some of these businesses that did have PPE and sanitation supplies, guess what? Some of them ran out, and some of them, the supplies even dried out. What we found during COVID was really important to communicate. What was happening, what is the status, what to expect next. Even though the government direction was changing continuously, it was important to be as proactive as possible and not react as much as, oh, we're in COVID, what am I going to do? Is to be prepared and be proactive with regards to planning for a safe environment and your own safety as well. So let's talk about facility management impact. Really important during COVID was trying to figure out if facility management resources or staffing were considered as essential resources. Of the FM team in a business, who was required to be on site? Who was required to be on call? Who was required to be available 24/7? It was a very trying time at the beginning of COVID, trying to figure out if the business model was going to remain the same, was going to change, or or status quo, right? I mean, status quo, no change, or maybe minor changes. So different work models were adopted as a result of the beginning of the pandemic. I can mention one facility, one organization with about 70 facilities within their portfolio. They decided that it was going to be from a facility perspective, the type of the routines and services they provided, there would be no change. And there was no layoffs of staff. What they decided to do was they started to set up a dispatch system where all of their maintenance operators would work from home, pick up their work orders from their computerized maintenance management system, and be dispatched from home. The only thing they would need to go do is go into the ops center to pick up any particular specific equipment that they need for in dealing with that particular work order. Big issue here was maintaining building systems control during COVID. You probably saw it in the media and you probably cringed. I cringed a number of times, to be honest, when I saw some business owners saying, well, our doors are closed, our buildings are empty, there's no staff here. So no, we're not keeping the lights on, and there's no need for FM people to come in and deal with the main day-to-day issues. And as you know, and I know, that it's really important that the building systems and controls are taken care of on a regular basis based on an ongoing preventative maintenance program. But some organizations were directed not, because buildings were not being used. As I said earlier, with regards to with regards to suppliers and contractors, there was a difficulty with regards to obtaining contractors and suppliers. Many FMers were required, almost had no other choice but to look for other resources to help them with regards to any services that had to be done during the beginning of COVID. As you're probably aware, there were limited supplies of material in the marketplace because there was no shipments happening. And everything was shut down. And the availability of supplies and material from a pricing wise went up as well. Contingency funds, talking to many facility people, the money wasn't there with regards to dealing with some of this PPE and supplies and additional wayfinding, signage, communication communication material. They had to dip into whatever contingency fund that was available. In some cases, guess what? The money that was dipped into was some of the FM or the operating dollars in maintaining that building. Communication was, again, really, really important, even from an FM perspective, and understanding that the FM person was identified as an essential service, and they were on site to ascertain that the buildings were being taken care of, and or the systems within that building, and also available for any staff or contractor that might require to come in and making sure the proper protocols are in place. Remote performance expectations. The facility person set up the rules and regulations with regards to help and integration with the senior management team, with regards to who was allowed in, who wasn't allowed in, what kind of protocols were set up in the office, and also remotely, and saying, here's your protocols with regards to how you can access the internet, how you can access the files within our company or organization. So security measures were high, and particularly if it was not even a consideration at all about, anyone working from home. Customer interaction, as you're aware, was very minimal, but if there was customers coming to the front door of your business and the doors were locked, someone had to be there to be able to deal with that customer's expectations and providing alternative ways of providing the goods and service provided by your company. Security protocols were high. As you're aware, you've probably seen them yourself. Additional security resources at the doors, checking protocols, checking access, checking with regards to COVID symptoms, with regards to, again, entry into the facility. So I want to talk about some of the key areas that we as facility people took high interest and gave priority during COVID. One of them is kind of looking at the financial situations. It's interesting in talking to many facility people during COVID, there seemed to be a stop with regards to taking care of their financial situation, being operating, and capital dollars are available to sustain the asset or the physical asset or the building. Again, a lot of the money and time and resources went to COVID with regards to the PPE and dealing with security measures. So again, it was really important to and I kept saying it to my friends and colleagues in the FM world, is don't forget about your operating capital. Right now, we are dealing with COVID, but keep in mind of the future as well. The funding that was available in the FM budget had to be prioritized, and it was based on, guess what? We have no money, we don't have no money, but it's prioritized based on the COVID needs and requirements. Emergency funding may have existed in some of the companies and may not have been available in some companies. That's why in some cases, some companies dipped into the reserve or they dipped into some of the kind of FM operating and capital budget. One area that was looked at as possible reduction of financial liability during COVID is reducing the utility cost during low occupancy, which is like a value add, right? If no use putting the lights on 24/7, if you're operating a 24/7 operation, when you could reduce some of that utility costs. Financial assessment, again, another one, a key one is the lease renegotiations. What we found during COVID is that where some of the businesses decided that they were going 100% remote, or they're looking at a hybrid style where some of the employees were working from home and or working from the office, they didn't need the same footprint or space within an office. And in particular, if they're releasing, now they're looking at another way of reducing financial liability. And one of it was reducing the footprint. The other area that I just want to focus on is the asset preservation. And it was important during COVID, reviewing any maintenance plans and capital projects. Some of these capital projects, because of lack of contractors, suppliers, material, were put on hold, okay? And what happened is some of these capital projects were also put on hold. However, even the most important jobs that went forward, and it was done, it was looking at jobs that had an impact on health and safety. No matter what, health and safety was given number one priority, and one way or the other, supply and material contractors were found. The current schedules that the facility management had with regards to maintaining of the equipment had to be revisited during COVID, with regards to what needed to be looked at weekly, what needed to be looked at quarterly, and what kind of some of the annual services needed to be revisited. One of the nice things that happened during COVID related to the asset preservation is that many facility people had a little bit more extra time to look at the deferred maintenance. So it was a catch-up time because they weren't dealing with the ongoing work order requests that are coming through their computerized maintenance system. So they dedicated time to clean up some of the backlog and be able to kind of close them off and reassess with regards to what was really needed in 2021 and 2022 and in the future. From an asset preservation, it was really important to ascertain that building routines were being maintained. And in some instances, in some organizations, they realized they didn't have really good routines. And they took the time and effort and started writing some SOPs or standard operating procedures to deal with it. Also, from a contractor and supplier during the pandemic, it was important now, as we go through the pandemic, is making sure there was a supplier or contractor available if an emergency should arise in your facility or your building over and above COVID. All right, I'm talking over and above COVID. If you had a flood case or you had a power outage, and how would you deal with that during the pandemic? When you're already dealing with a major issue, how would you deal with another one? And also dealing with any service reduction, as I said, from an internet and or power, is really keeping in mind with regard to what's the impact, not only on your customers and your employees, but what's the impact on the physical asset as well. Communication is another key one during the pandemic, is ascertaining that you are communicating staff and customers at all times, and based on the public health directive, and ensuring that all policies from an HR perspective are being followed effectively. This is, again, the role of the leadership team, and ascertaining that they're supporting customers, staff and contractors and suppliers, your internal and external stakeholders, and making sure and advising everyone that our facilities are safe. You know, we are moving forward as a business. Our doors are open, not literally during COVID, but at least from the business side, we're continuing to run a business. Communication for during COVID, if you were able to open your doors for customer service, it was really important to ensure there was proper wayfinding and signage, in particular, you know, and with a 6 feet distancing, and again, ensuring there was a proper distancing within your facility or your space. And it was really important, even today, is ensuring there was ongoing communication. It didn't matter if your staff or your customers were remote, is the fact that communication was really important and how you did that on a regular basis. Risk priority is one of the key areas that we need to pause and think about. We can look from a workplace perspective, and we know that the personal protective equipment that we talk about, PPE and masks, social distancing, is really important. And ensuring that there are proper policies in place within your facility, and ensuring that your equipment is in good condition and well maintained. But the best solution, as we all know, from a risk perspective, is eliminating the problem, and it's eliminating COVID. And as we all know, we've been living this for the last 18 months. So the best thing we can do as stakeholders and as professionals is look at ways of getting closer to help eliminate the COVID-19 situation, and follow the protocols and the healthcare protocols as much as possible, and help all of us kind of get rid of COVID-19. So let's talk about how do we get back on track. There's many lessons learned during COVID. There's some habits that were created, good and bad, and maybe some new routines as well that we need to revisit and say, do we want to change some of our processes as a result in being in shutdown or being in a stage three, which most of us are in on Ontario, with regards to continuing our business and ensuring that we can continue to be successful as a business or as businesses. So we need to assess the next normal. And what does that look like? It is a dilemma for many businesses. And what I'm referring to there is right now, there is no mandate or specific mandate with regards to when you are going to return back to the office. So keep in mind, your staff or your teams have been working remotely. It's the location that's changing. It's not necessarily the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. What's really important to keep in mind, if you've been allowing your organization to work from home, as many staff have created new habits, right? I'm going to give an example that if you've been working at home and you have pets, you probably took the opportunity to walk your dog 3 times a day just to get out of the house. So coming back in the workplace, are you bringing your dog? Or are you taking time off to walk your dog? So what kind of new habits or what new habits are you proposing to put in place as a result of your staff person taking some time to walk 3 times a day? Many companies are also looking at a reduction of rental space. As I said earlier, we're talking about a hybrid work style now, right? And what that could mean is that instead of having 100 staff in a particular workspace, you may only have 80 or 90. So do you need that workspace anymore? Do you need the collaborative workspace if you're collaborating through Zoom or Teams, for example? So what's really important when we talk about assessing the next normal is assessing with regards to if you're going back into a workplace, what are you going to do about the amenity spaces? What are you going to do about your kitchens or lounges? What are you going to do about the collaborative space? Is everyone going to be eager to collaborate face-to-face post-COVID? Or as we, look at ways of going back into the workplace. And then the PPE measures, I think it's going to stay. So I think what we need to think about is, do we have sufficient supply as we congregate back into the workplace versus in the home environment? So let's look, my mouse is going funny here. So some business decisions that need to be made here is when to return back to work or back to the office. And you know what? It's scattered all over the place. I mean, there's no defined criteria. There's not a standard operating procedure with regards to when the best time to go back into the workplace. I know that many organizations have sent out surveys to their staff with regards to, do you want to come back in the office? Would you be agreeable to come on a hybrid basis? What situations would you require to meet with another teammate face-to-face? And what situations would you need to meet with a customer face-to-face? So many organizations are piloting some examples with regards to going back into the workplace, looking at redesigning their workspace as well, probably looking at more closed environments where I've heard that when those walls go up and doors are there, the masks come off, right? But otherwise, the mask is on while you're walking through the office. Also, conforming to government directives is really important as we look at going back into the workplace and making sure that all PPE and vaccination protocols are adhered to as we look at going back into the workplace. Changing expectations. I look at there's 5 criteria that we need to look at for a different and better experience going back into the workplace. And one of them is safety, of course, making sure that proper protocols are in place, making sure that your staff person or customers that are coming in feel that, it's comfortable and they belong in that environment and they're part of the team. Ensure a level of productivity, there's comfort, and again, being able to, hopefully the tension isn't there. And then there's also control with regards to where they're working and how they work. Provided a checklist today with regards to pre-occupancy. some of the key ones that we're looking at today is workplace and distancing. So if we're looking at workstations, are the workstations the same as before with regards to by classification or work responsibilities, or is there a factor dealing with COVID-19 and dealing with social protocols? The other thing that's on the pre-occupancy is looking at your building maintenance, making sure all the key building maintenance activities are in place, or they continue to happen. It could be as direct as housekeeping services or custodial services. You may say to me, well, you know what, we actually reduced our custodial work order responsibilities. Well, if you're going to have people coming back in, i.e. staff or customers, you got to look at maintaining that service again. Sanitation levels will probably be higher than it was pre-COVID, and you need to figure out how many times are you going to be monitoring the washrooms, for example. How often are you going to monitor the front doors? How often are you going to look at elevators and the controls on an elevator, for example? Other key areas dealing with the HVAC and air quality, and I'll talk about that in a second. Checklist is dealing with employees, who's coming back into the work office environment, how are customers going to get their service, and then we talk about ongoing communication, even more so as you go back into the workplace. Okay. So, sorry, my mouse keeps going forward, my apologies. Okay, so let's look at workforce. Just to give you some stats, in 2016, there was about 4% that were working from home, okay, back in 2016. And now today, we're at 32%. And that's based on stats at the beginning of 2021. And you probably know, as I know, in the last 6 to 8 months, there's been a lot of changes happening. And I can see that number increasing even higher than the 32% that's been identified in Canada. So what we're looking at is that the productivity of our workers, or you and your employees, you know, it's going to be the same, or it's even going to be greater. And that's statistically proven through Stats Canada. So let's talk a little bit about the building maintenance, right? Now we're talking about going back to the new normal. So what's really important is ascertaining that you've got your inspection routines documented and ready to go. And then you started them off already before any pre-occupancy or before anyone comes back into the workplace. We've heard about water quality, making sure that the lines are flushed and making sure that the pipelines are not harboring any harmful bacteria, and possibly getting some potable water testing done. I've seen so many facilities during COVID that were shut down, and I highly recommend getting a potable water testing. And they hadn't even thought of doing something like that. They were just thinking that we just turn on the water and everything will be hunky-dory. Reviewing custodial service schedules and cleaning habits is going to be important. Keeping the office in a deep clean. So what I mean by that is not the regular routine. We have an extra step in dealing with sanitation measures, because if you want your employees to come back into the workplace, everyone is reacting to COVID differently, i.e. from a risk tolerance perspective. And you got to make sure that the offices are cleaned. Check fire and life safety equipment if they haven't been checked during COVID. And again, some organizations, they postpone some of this checking of the fire and life safety systems. It's important to get that checked and put back into your maintenance routines. And also check any door and car readers, because they may have been inoperable as well during COVID, right? HVAC are fully inspected and operational before you're looking at people coming back into the workplace or in the office environment. Replace any of the filters on any of the HVAC systems. As we know, as we've been advised, that COVID does spread through airborne droplets, will be ideal at getting your HVAC system tested and balanced before you have people coming back into the workplace. Sanitation measures and proper sanitation measures are being adhered to. and public measures are taken care of. Make sure you got a proper stock of sanitation measures and supplies, and make sure that you follow the public health measures. Employees, what we're looking at is from a customer service, probably continue with curbside pickup. Again, I look at the risk level and risk tolerance of customers and your staff with regards to how they're going to continue into the next normal, and looking at screening protocols and providing easy access to sanitation, and making sure there's proper documentation either on the internet or in your Ethernet or in your filing system for staff to find documentation, and making sure that everything's being followed. Communication, clear communication is really important, as I emphasize, as one of the key things that I've noticed that was missing during COVID, and then it got picked up over the last year, not at the beginning, but in the last 12 months. I admit that communication was important and it was continuous, but it's even more important as you go into the new normal. Health and safety measures, health and safety number one, keeping staff, customers, buildings safe, keeping top of all the safety responsibilities, making sure the sanitation measures are being adhered to, and help people understand the importance of health and safety. It's an education. We have an obligation to do that. Now let's kind of look at, what we've been through in the last 18 months is amazing. And we need to look at it as, what have we learned through COVID that we can adapt into our workplace? Technology is a one key one that has cropped up quite a bit, even pre-COVID, but even more so now, particularly dealing with occupancy sensors and trying to help with regards to how frequent cleaning should be done in a particular space, like a washroom. This is what I've seen more and more, is that technology has taken over as an alternative, as a touchless way of keeping on top of sanitation and preventative maintenance measures. Real estate, I just want to mention that real estate is going to be a big thing in the new normal with regards to space allocations, construction, with regards to lease renegotiations, with regards to possibly looking at, we know in the marketplace now with regards to real estate from a buyer's perspective, that the real estate has skyrocketed. But what we're looking at is we have to look at the best way to optimize our space to continue your business. Corporate responsibility is another key one. And I won't go into a lot of detail. I get many of you are already probably on top of this, but it's important to continue looking at energy programs, sustainability programs, look at climate change, particularly with the government of Canada adopting that as one of their platforms, speeches, initiatives that we got to watch for that, because hopefully there's going to be some money and incentives there to help us along. And then, as I said, climate change is that big one that we need to keep in mind as it relates to, particularly the federal government adopting that as one of their campaign messages. Planning for change. Change is the process of helping through an organization. We've gone through a lot of change over the last 18 months, and it's not going to change. Even though you're asking your employees to come back into the workplace, you're asking your customers to walk through your front doors now, it's a change. And keep that in mind, that is not business as usual for many of your team members. And you got to be aware of the barriers to change and be able to help staff, customers go through that change. Oops. So some tips here is really kind of oversee the day-to-day operations and make sure that the daily safety standards are prepare for any case of emergency beyond COVID that could happen in your facility, and look at internet outages or power outages, and make sure that proper protocols are in place. Also look for establish an accurate asset hierarchy. If you have the time, now is a good time to do it. And kind of look for the future now, not just today. Don't be reactive, look at proactive with regards to your asset inventory, preventative maintenance routine, look at possible cross training, look at what kind of resources you have to keep your building safe. Is it time to beef up those resources and make sure that the asset is being well maintained and look at your benchmarks and look at your key performance indicators. A really nice way to help advance the business direction of your company. So imagine, what does the new normal look like in your organization? Are you ascertaining health and safety? Are you ascertaining sentiments of habit of your staff? What's your vision? Use your imagination, be innovative with regards to coming up with the optimal office environment as we go back into the new normal. So the final message here is that it's not over yet. So we have some opportunity to be creative and innovative as we go back into the new normal. And I said, my final message here is look at some of the practices you've adopted over the last 18 months and see if they can be some permanent changes within your workplace. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Marcia. I think we have time for at least one question, maybe two. Thanks for the flashback too, back to March 2020. Question here, did you see any organizations doing work that had been put off during this time? Such as like they were waiting for a shutdown or something to do it and they actually did it.
Laura, absolutely. The deferred maintenance was actually being done during the shutdown. Because if you can imagine, a lot of the facility people were responsive for day-to-day reactive work, and they're responding to work order requests based on priority. Now, when there was not that volume of work orders, they were able to look at the deferred maintenance that had been accumulated over the last 3 to 5 years and start prioritizing some of that work, assuming that some of the money in cash was there to be able to undertake that work. Good question.
Yeah, that was definitely a benefit, but and then, well, his other question, or it's for places where they have lease customers releasing the space. Did you see any organizations making plans or like changes around that? What did they? Were spaces given up, I guess, too, over?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when the beginning of the pandemic, when again everyone was working from home, even at that particular point in time, there was a reassessment with regards to, are we actually going back into the workplace, and how many staff are going back into the workplace? So if you're looking at a leased space, there were discussions with regards to, do we even need that much lease space? And again, the discussion started at 5 to 10% and even more. And we've heard of companies over the last 18 months that have decided to go 100% virtual too, right? And guess what? That impacts on the physical asset as well, or the building or the space. And then they're looking at renegotiating of the space or selling the property, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thanks again. And just a reminder for everyone that you can find Marcia on FeedLoop in the networking tab if you have any further questions to follow up with her. And also that the session is recorded and will be there until November 30th. So you can have a look at that again.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone for taking the time today, and all the best on the new normal.
Yes. Thanks.